of chirping, so I was very pleased to hear your views on regulation there. I want to throw back that question of whether any of you as leaders in our sector have any thoughts on the question of whether there should be a single regulatory body, whether you would agree with his view on that. I'm also interested in the differences that you identified there between the competition that you experienced in your private sector career and the collaboration between fundraisers that is a key feature of our sector. And I'd love to hear your views on that if anybody has any. But I'm now going to shut up and throw the floor open to you guys. So can I ask you just to raise your hands if you've got a question about any aspect of the funding economy or the presentations that you've already heard. Can I ask you to just introduce yourself before you ask your question, partly for the purposes of our film, but also for our panellists. And I'm going to begin by taking 3 questions, if that's okay, and then I'll give the panel a chance to respond. Okay, go ahead.
So, Natalie Campbell, a couple of facts in terms of this question. So I'm a trustee of Unlimited, a new board member of BIG, the chair of NICVIS, which is the National Council for Voluntary Services, but also a core fellow. And listening to what you were saying about leadership, but also access and opportunity, how do we get over the barrier of knowledge and skills development? Because I think part of the issue is that organisations don't have the right people internally to understand social investment, the balance sheet, but the actual financial mechanisms and the way to engage with all of the different options out there. But equally, some of the processes that sit behind fundraising and then what that then does for the organisation, so the sort of strategic elements of it. I think there's a lot of great people that do other things. I think money within charities and how to manage money isn't something that across the board is done very well. And I think there needs to be a leadership and a training piece here, but I don't necessarily know when and how that's going to happen.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. Any other questions? Yeah?
Yeah, Sam Young, your VSO, formerly Charity Commissioner. Just Jim, in your categorisation of the social investment market, or the investment market you're talking about, when you did it in relation to charity, actually purpose with profit or profit with purpose, as almost 2 separate categories. And you said in your last remark that there's a lot of money out there. The issue is getting the right cases to them. Where do you see the balance in that social investment market? I mean, in terms of going in for it, is the starting point profit and saying, well, we'll stick a little purpose in to make us feel better, but essentially we're after a return? Or is it being driven more by purpose with a sense that we need to make some kind of return, but actually the purpose is the critical thing? I think a lot of the confusion that there is in charities about accessing this market is what's the jumping off point? You know, how do you present it? You could so easily risk going in and talking about purpose, and you have the money men in there shaking their heads saying, where's the profit in it? Or you can go in talking hard-nosed figures as far as you can, and have the response that, well, actually we're much more interested in the purpose, and I think there's a good deal of confusion there.
Thanks, Sam. Can I ask for one more question and then I'm going to let the panel respond?
Kind of picks up on both of these things. So I'm Lorraine Clifton, the CEO of Dick Sargent, and I pick up also on your question of the last speaker. I wouldn't agree with your word. I wouldn't agree with your suggestion that bankers compete and we collaborate. In fundraising terms, fundraising directors go and chat about strategy, and we're in DM and we're still competitive. We're still competing.
Sure.
We're not collaborating with the Asda and Picture or anything. So it's competing with a friendly
face.
The other point I would make is about social investment. Hugely important, but I think there's a real danger that it's almost becoming a fashion. It's the same debate about 3 into 1. Yes, if there's a problem big enough to be worth the effort of solving. Social investment, yes, if it's the right answer. I mean, we've looked at social investment very briefly in terms of maybe we want to expand our shops. And actually, when you look at what it costs, when you look at the additional reporting requirements, they're not cheaper for us to get bankrupt. And we're not going to do that right now, but there are cheaper ways of raising the kind of money we want as we did. So I think it's hugely powerful. I think it's really interesting. I think we've got to be really careful that people really think through why it's the right vehicle before they invest a significant amount of time in moving forward.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to take those 3 questions and then give you another chance to ask some more, if that's okay. So first of all, we had Natalie's question. So how do we overcome barriers to fundraising when the staff who are recruiting don't necessarily have the right expertise on the issues? So can I invite the panel to respond to that one?
Well, in finance terms, I mean, we're audited to within an inch of our lives. My finance team, I would say, I mean, I'm not particularly good in that area. That's an understatement. That's another NHS thing. So I have very, very clever people who work there. I think with finance, I'm not sure I agree. I think that we have to be incredibly good, transparent, honest, thorough, and very efficient. Going back to the fundraising side, though, this is a journey we're on, and we're still carrying a bit of the legacy that fundraising is a nice-to-do activity rather than a fully trained professional discipline. And just one little word about major donor fundraising, which I was talking about before we came in. On the whole, major donor fundraisers are born, not made. And so just be very careful about your recruiting. Fundraisers by definition can do the blarney. But major donor, you can, community fundraising, legacy fundraising, grant fundraising, charitable trust fundraising, there is a bit of a process. Major donor fundraising is all about empathy, about connections. And so that's a continual journey in terms of professional fundraising. But finance, I think we're pretty hot.
Just a point of clarification that, so I guess, I don't want it to silo it. I think within, especially micro and small charities, the finances and fundraising and investment is everyone's job. So I'm thinking more broadly that how do we support organisations as a whole to think strategically about the money and what it means and how it's spent and how we bring it in and what that means. And I guess it's all closely related to the social investment. So I think that's the big grey area, but it's for everyone.
Sure. Jim, would you like to come back on that one?
Yeah, I will, and backdrop to my comment, I run an advisory business here, so I have a particular angle on it, but you also probably saw the badge on the slides of Cass Business School. I teach on the Charities and NGO Masters courses there, so I have a strong view about education of the leaders of the future, and there's some amazing people that go on those Masters programs. I think 3 key elements to it, and they don't give a complete answer. I wish they did. One is that the advisory sector needs to step up and needs to become more tailored and more specialist to the needs of the charities. Bates Wells is clearly positioned in that position and being very keen on it. We would prefer to see rather more advisors who are genuinely focusing on this arena, so that the charities have got somewhere good from which to buy. The second one is educational development. Cass Masters course, the Northampton University Social Enterprise course, there are South Bank University. There are various very good sources of training and development. I think there need to be more. There's some slices here and there. I think we need better development. The Institute of Fundraising has got, is really on top of its game, I think, on training and development. Leadership within the voluntary sector is a broad field. I think it's got some further way to go. So more development in that field. Third element is community. that we heard about how fundraisers have the wisdom to share knowledge. I think we do to some degree within the charity sector. We're actually not bad at it. I think we need to get more organised at it. It's particularly struck me, I mentioned the Public Service Mutuals competition the Cabinet Office has been running. We were joint winners on the prize, but putting forward a proposal from the Public Service Mutual sector that they should get organised as a community to support and mentor the young leaders of the future and not so young leaders. I actually think more organised mentoring and supporting and bringing forward of our young leaders, not just relying on extraordinary talent to come out. I think we need to take that talent and foster and develop it. So advisory, education, and community is the start of 10.
Thanks. To you.
Natalie, I think the issue is one that you by dint of circumstance have to break up into segments, because the large charities, because they have so much money flowing through them, have all the skills generally to manage that money. Other organisations won't, and you can take on my example of PFRA. God bless the people who were running this organisation for 10 years before me. But when I arrived, finance was looked after by a subcommittee, and finance on the board every other month was mentioned, are we okay financially? Yeah, okay. That was finance. So I come in and go, oh, yeah. And everyone was crowing about us having a war chest. What's a war chest? A war chest is how many hundreds of thousands of pounds that we're doing nothing with. Well, frankly, we should do something. No point doing what we do, we should keep them in war chest for the sake of keeping them. Like how big it is, told me. So what about all the risks and what about all the liabilities, potential liabilities? And they said, what do you mean? So what if the government turned and say we're going to legislate and we don't need you anymore? We have to close this organisation back. There's a cost of doing that. And I sent the finance manager away to come back and tell me how much the cost was. And it's doing all that basic management skill stuff that we need to do. At the other end of the scale, with fundraisers or people in junior positions in organisations, charities in this case, if you look at what I think is happening a lot in the world now, and I've just been in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia, and the banks there, they're taking bright young things into the bank, and their learning cycle is not just their fast track program. I was on a fast track program. It's not 3 years before you made a manager of a car expense account. This is forever. It's an ongoing, continual learning process. And they have their lives sort of plotted out. If they want to stay in the bank, they know what they've got to do. Some of it's academic, some of it's experiential, it's planned for them. And there was a lady the other night, a fundraising director of a Leaders in Fundraising conference, and she stood up and spoke about the people who work with her on the fundraising team. And she warned everyone. She said, look out, because they're coming for your jobs because they're brilliant. And what she was evidently doing was thinking about them not just from their marketing or fundraising or operational skills. They're working on them as individuals because we're all different and we need different sorts of help. Do you know what I mean? And that's another dimension to personal development which is relatively rare. But to work on individuals, I do a lot of sales training. And I work with sales teams, and someone gave me a brand new group of stockbrokers one day, and I walked in the office, and they gave me a conference room like this, and I walked in, I sent them all home, and the boss came running in, and he said, what have you done? I said, I've sent them home. He said, why? I said, to get dressed. He said, why? I said, to look like stockbrokers. They've got jeans on and trousers. I'm sorry. They've got trousers on with creases and black shoes and shiny, because that's what customers expect a stockbroker to look like. They went home and came back the next day, booted and suited, and then we started training. And it's that level of how you work on people, and I think we have a lot to do in that.
Thanks, Paul. So next question was Sam's question. What's the balance between financial return and social investment here? I'm going to let Jim start on that one.
Okay. Purpose with profit, profit with purpose. I think here we are, and this just to a fair extent links in with Lorraine's point as well. We have a range of resource available to us as charities, and we've got to sell the idea to that resource in the right way. The resource being grant making, major donor philanthropy, chugging market, social investment market in all its myriad forms. We need to be clear on what we need. There is a clear dividing line between the fundraising end of things and the social investment, and it's in the investment world. We've got to have a reasonable prospect of paying a return of whatever level, and it can be minuscule, and we've got to have a reasonable prospect of returning the money or refinancing. That is a different piece in the jigsaw from the grant making. And don't let's use the wrong piece in the wrong jigsaw. So we need to be clear at the outset, and this is the bit I'm finding a number of charities struggling to work out. Which one is it we need? Do we need revenue funding? You don't have investment for revenue funding. Your friends will tell us that. Or do we need something else? So right at the heart of it is understanding what we're doing, what we need from you, the informed ask, which our fundraising colleagues need as well, and therefore which resource from this range we need to fulfil that gap. So I think it's that is the starting point, and to a fair degree the ending point as well. Decide which side of that line you are, and that will lead you down the investment route of fundraising.
Thanks. Does anyone else want to come in on this one?
Yes, if I may quickly, I think that is an issue around understanding, and I get you can understand the purpose or profit angle, but I don't think it's as clear as that. And I was talking to Jim earlier about having chaired a conference a couple of weeks ago on social investment. It became evident that the body of the Kirk didn't necessarily understand not so much what it was, how they went about the process. And that's the same message that I was talking about earlier. It's about allowing time to go by and allowing people to understand it. And there are good parallels in this world. Tony Blair launched a thing called PEPS, and everyone had a person equity plan. New government comes in and says, oh, we're going to do something different. We're going to call them ISAs. So you have 10 years of getting used to what PEP was and understanding how to use it. Some bozo comes in and it's the same product, but he calls it an ISA. And as soon as you change the name, everyone goes, oh, what's different? And they don't want that because they want continuity. And the issue about social investment is that the people who create social investment vehicles understand them, and they understand the nuances and how they work. The people to whom they're targeting just see it like this, and they just wait for someone to get rid of the fog. And it's about the purchasing process. When most of us buy a chocolate bar, it tends to be an impulse purchase. When you buy a car, it is not an impulse purchase. You think about it, you dream about it, you see them on the road, you're going to sit in them, and houses are just the same. They're not impulse purchases. And something as serious as social investment is not an impulse purchase, because you have to understand all the ins and outs, and people are fearsome of it. And it became evident in this particular day that that's an issue. I'm doing a lot of work at the moment in digital currencies, bitcoins. Have you heard of bitcoins? Well, as the internet is to communication and information now, bitcoins are to currency in the future. You will all be dealing in bitcoins and that kind of stuff in the future. You will. But it's learning its way through the ethos at the moment. People are trying to get their heads around how it works and what this bitcoin thing. And once that happens, then you get that sense of normality that people understand, and then they begin to use them for the purpose they're required. That's the issue.
Jill, did you want to come in on this question?
I'm learning more than I could say.
Sure. Just on your point about lifting the fog, for those of you who are from small charities, NCBO runs free masterclasses in commercial skills to help charities secure contracts. We also are involved in running a series of roadshows on social investment all around the country. So if you want to find more details of those, you can access that off our website, including if you're not London-based.
Ruth, can I just pick up on one thing that Paul said, which appeared in a whole range of other very interesting things that I think is a very important point for us to pick up on. He was talking about purchase of social investment. I think there is a big concern, certainly in my mind, perhaps in many others at the moment, that social investment is being sold to the sector quite a bit, for very genuine reasons, no doubt, and encouraged to take it up. I'm very keen to see a switch around to that point where the sector is purchasing social investment and understanding where it will be really useful for the marvellous work that they're trying to deliver. And that's why I think we have gradually to learn a better understanding of what this tool means and where it fits in a whole spectrum of things that we need to be able to deliver our work and then to be able to buy intelligently in that field.
Okay, this is a nice seed into Lorraine's question, I think, about whether social investment is a fashion. Again, just to give you another bit for your reading list.
Sorry, I didn't say fashion. No,
Sorry.
It has a purpose. I just think it's...
No, the risk of it being seen as
And
a
I
fashion.
think people need to think through carefully whether it's the right money, whereas it's being sold as a way of raising money, as opposed
Sure.
to fundraising. You know,
Sure.
being sold as a way of accessing money, it's not the only way of accessing money, and it comes with a significant cost. That's not the same as fashion.
Sure, sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth there. So I just, again, just something that people might want to go away and read. The Alternative Commission on Social Investment talked about this gap between the rhetoric of unlocking the first $1 trillion of social investment and the reality of some of the barriers that charities face in accessing that investment and being investment ready. So it's another thing that you can find on the web if you're interested in reading a bit more about that. But over to the panel. Paul, would you like to start on this one?
Yeah, what worries me about this, and again it's me beating the same drum I suppose, is, an example is small and medium enterprise companies who are all desperately in need of money and finance and capital to get their businesses going. And we run special projects for these, and I do some pro bono work in this area. And very often, all the work I have to do is explain to an engineer who's developed this really good process, or a technologist who's got a great piece of software, is explain to them what a cash flow forecast is. Because they want to borrow money from someone. And I promise you, if you don't ask anyone you're going to lend money to, when they're going to pay you back, you're mistaken, you're going to lose a lot of money. And that's what banks or anyone who's lending you money wants to do. What's cash flow forecast? So it's back to the same thing. Well, how does this work, and what do I have to do? In the charity world, hopefully, if I sat in a strategy meeting with fundraisers, there would be a panoply of opportunities to raise money, and you'd be cherry picking which is the best and which is the line of least resistance in terms of cost. And that becomes a difficult process, and it's getting more complicated, which means you'll end up with more regulation, because that's what happens with complication and competition generally. And it requires clearer communication and probably clearer structuring. Because what the finance world is very clever at doing is complicating things. It really did, brilliant. We used to, I shouldn't say this again on camera, when someone opened an account, we used to give them, I was a trainee learning how to do it, give someone the terms and conditions, and I used to say, it was sorry, because it'll put us to sleep in 2 seconds. That's small print. And you know this thing about banks hiding the small print, the details? You shouldn't do that. That's the wrong thing to do, because that's what catches you out. And it's what creates a set. All the PPI thing that's gone on, this inordinate amount of pressure. It's about poor communication, lack of clarity, and not decomplicating the offering or the proposition. And I think that's a big lesson for everyone to learn. Both sides. It's not just charities, it's people who bring you funding or where you get it from.
Did you want to add to that, Jim, before we take another question?
Yeah, I'm very much with you, Lorraine, on the point that the social investment is not a fix to everything. It's one of a number of tools that you draw. On the cost of some of it, I think we've got, particularly if we look up towards the end of social impact bonds and that part of social investment, we've got a lot of development cost of the concept. being wrapped up in it, and drawing on the time of organisations in service development as well as the financial instruments. The costs are too high, they need to come down. They should come down, as we can learn from other examples, I hope. If not, then we've got to push them down. I think on some of the products, it's easy to look at what others have done and see actually the cost of something else they're building wrapped up in the financing bit. The adoption bond is an example of that. It was a very expensive thing to get going, but then actually an 18-way charity delivery network, delivering services UK-wide to a new virtual market is not the simplest form of cat herding put together, and there is a heck of a lot of the cost was in doing that rather than the finance side. So compare like with like. Bank debt is a tremendously good source that we have been using for many years. I cite one that I looked at a little while ago. Milton Keynes Parks Trust raised an extra 30 million on conventional single source bank debt, negotiated it finally, came to a very good cost-effective deal with the right flex to make sure that it fitted what they need. It's a great place for that, and we need to enhance the knowledge amongst the banks so that they can deliver what we need in that field. On the other end of the scale, something equally straightforward, but which is still broadly in that investment in the social range. One of the charity-owned schools groups refinanced the bank debt in one of its schools, which was 350k or so, by two private individuals coming in and each putting up 175k on fairly soft loans, which actually look better than leaving their money in the conventional cash markets. I think there's this whole range, and we've got to find the right ones to fit the right places. But yeah, don't get confused as to what the cost is actually funding, and let's bring the cost down on some of the social investment projects.
Thanks, Jim. So